Yeah, another thing you touched on there, and this I've experienced this personally as a black male. You talked about the disproportionate discipline. I've experienced that my entire life. I've seen it so many times. And I was reading a book not too long ago called "The Boy Crisis" by Dr. John Gray. Very good book, and he was talking about how boys are typically receive more punishment, harsher punishment than girls, and even black boys are seen as older, even though they're seen as older and more. And me being a large black man, I've been a big person my entire life, and so when I was in third or fourth grade, I was looking eye to eye with my teachers almost. So they perceived me to be older than I was, and if ever something happened, I was the first one that was to blame, or somebody of similar stature to me that was black. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Leads me to my next question for you.
Sure.
Our young black boys are struggling. There's no question about it. The numbers don't lie. You know, we can get upset and arms about it when people talk about it, but it's the truth. Our black boys are falling behind. What do you think some of the factors are behind that? I have my own theory, but I would love to hear yours.
Implicit and explicit bias. A lot of times in school districts, if you look at the demographics of the educators that are serving kids, a lot of times they don't look like the communities that they're serving. And so there is a cultural knowledge gap. And so there are a lot of assumptions made about black boys.
Yes.
Educational systems are not always conducive to different ways of learning. And so they may misinterpret high energy as disruption.
Yep.
When it could be that child's just way of being creative and learning. The best schools in the country are creating environments where kids can sit on bouncy balls or play with objects while they're learning, because they understand that that's how, children learn. If you go to a conference as an adult, you'll see they put little widgets all around the tables to keep us busy. That's because that innately is how people kind of pay attention and learn. So for them to mischaracterize that at the elementary, middle, and high school levels is an injustice for our boys. The other thing that you said, you touched on it, was the adulterization of black boys. Taller, stronger, so a perceived threat.
Yes.
And 9 times out of 10, 2 boys get in a fight. One is black, the other is not. The black child is going to be disciplined 4 times that of their classmate. And the alarming rate, so that's been studied dating back to the 60s and 70s. My dissertation, shameless plug here.
Let's go.
Read the title, The Deliberate Dimming of Black Girl Magic, a study on the possible impact of race and gender on the educational experience of Black girls in a large urban school district in Texas. I studied a school district. I won't say which one, but Black girls were on the rise in disproportionate numbers. And as I peeled back the onion and looked at the national data, Black girls are being treated the same way. Why? Because they're being adulterized. They look older. They may be more shapely. They may come from a household where they can authentically be themselves, show up at school in that way, and be characterized as loud and disruptive. And so their brilliance is dimmed because they're treated like adults as opposed to young girls. And so our babies have always experienced that. And Black girls have always experienced that. The reason I chose this topic is because I was that girl. I was over-disciplined in elementary and in private school. And so my lived experience was that of what we see today in schools. All of that has a ripple effect. And unfortunately, our kids are harmed at alarming rates as compared to their colleagues and their classmates.
And that's something that has to be addressed and it has to be discussed. And as you well know, I'm a proponent of everything leads back to the home. We have to also in the home create environments for our children, for them to be conducive for them to learn, first of all, even to send them into that environment. Then they go in and they get told that they're wrong or something's not right. I was watching a video not too long, did a study, and these teachers were brought in the room, and you've probably seen this, and they were students at a table, and they said, which child is misbehaving?
Yeah.
None of the children were misbehaving, but I think it was like at an 80-something% rate, they chose the young black kid. I think it was a little boy in the study, but they picked the minority child that was misbehaving, but none of the children were actually misbehaving. So that's that, like you said, that implicit bias that is inherent in a lot of people, and people want to act like that's not real, but really it is. And
Absolutely,
so,
it is.
oh yeah, and I refuse to believe that we're inherently more violent, inherently more apt to commit crime. That's just not true. There's a lot of factors that factor into it. But I'm a firm believer, and we've talked, my wife and I, we control what we control. And we've raised 3 children, and we are so proud to say we've never had to go to a school. I've never had to go up there because my child was acting crazy. I've never had to sit down with a parent teacher and say, oh, she's like, oh, your child's out of control. I think what we can't control is the home. And I think that's a big part of it. And we have to accept our part in it also, but we can't ignore the other factors either.
Absolutely.
It's a systemic thing, and we all have a part to play in it. But as parents, I know that we need to do a better job, because I see, by virtue of what I do for a living, I see the other side of children not being disciplined, not understanding what discipline is. And you still have people who just can't follow rules, refuse to submit to any kind of authority because they never were taught it. And that's a really big part of it too.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And unfortunately, COVID exacerbated that issue.
Mm-hmm.
You had children who were at home. They didn't have the same constraints that you have in a classroom environment. And they were, at home during the learning day.
Yep.
And so we saw a lot of things that were funny on social media with kids misbehaving.
Yep.
But the reality is that that's impairing that child's future.
Mm-hmm.
And we can say in the educational system, it's not our job to help and support parents, but when teachers and parents work together,
Mm-hmm.
that is the best environment that you can surround that child in.
Yep.
So it's working in tandem with the campus. That's where the magic happens. But one thing that I think that the educational system can do a better job of is educating and empowering parents so that they understand how the school system works and doesn't work for their child, so that they can properly advocate and so that they can properly support their children. And so, amazing parents like you, I'm not surprised that you've never had issues with your babies, because they're amazing. And I got to see that firsthand. But for children who may not have the support that you provide to your kids, it's up to the school system to help provide the wraparound services and the support for children. And I won't say the organization that I work for, but that's what we do.
Gotcha.
We provide caring adults in the educational environment so that kids have an adult that they can lean on, that they can confide in, and that they can get support from if and when they need it.
Something that surprised me when I would go to Chantel's school, and how young these parents were. That's what I was like, because I'm older. I'm an older parent, and I go in there to see my wife, and I'm thinking it's a student. This is a parent. And some of these people are so young because they're having these kids at very young ages. So you taught kinder, so a 5-year-old, so the mom could be 18, 19.
My youngest parent was, she was 16.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And so when you have somebody that young that has a child, what are some things that they could implement to really give their child a head start? Because they don't know much about life themselves. What are some things they can actually implement to help their child?
Oh, that's a good question. So you said Head Start. There are lots of early education programs. And a lot of times when you have young people having children, they may opt to work and leave the baby with Big Mama or an auntie or a relative, as opposed to exploring a pre-K program or finding subsidies so that they can put their children in daycare so that they can get that jump start. Littlest learners, reading. Reading is fundamental. We've heard that term, but it's true. The more you read to a child, especially in their formative years, pre-K, you're really setting them up for success. And you're broadening their horizons in terms of what they're learning in the pages of a book. Other things that I'd recommend, there's so many programs that are free and open to the public that provide supplemental educational opportunities. Local children's museums have lots of programming. In school districts in the school district that I worked for, we would actually partner and pay for opportunities for families to provide added exposure to museums and field trips. And the problem was folks wouldn't show. The free resource was there.
So unfortunate.
And folks wouldn't show. So really, it's just raising awareness and, acknowledging that this is just the state that we're in. You're going to have young parents who are entering the educational system. And it's up to the school systems to provide the resources for those parents.
Yeah.
If you really, want to influence the community that schools are located in, they cannot do that by just working within the confines of the walls of a campus. You've got to go outside and provide learning opportunities for families, because I've seen, young single parents with amazing energy towards their kids. They realize, what they did and would have liked to do things differently. And they're determined to ensure that their child has a different path. And so I've seen, what happens when a school system embraces parents, doesn't fear empowering them, doesn't fear the hard questions, and is ready to not only educate their child, but the parent too.